All right, folks, welcome out. We're moving right along. We're looking at the cliff notes for the Federalist papers. We're looking at the summaries and the analysis. We're not going into minute detail. We're not reading through all the specific literature. I would advise you to do that. The messages and the details to really know this and to know it the better, right? Tomorrow, very relevant day tomorrow, right? Election day. Do you really know what your elected officials are doing? Do you understand the rules? Do you understand the laws? Do you understand what they can and cannot do? Do you understand the hype? Do you understand the misinformation? Do you understand the disinformation? There is a lot I'm looking at these political ads, lies all over the place, just endless misinformation. I don't listen to them at all. I don't listen to political ads. I don't listen to mainstream media news. I get my news from private sources, from the left, the center, and the right. I'm looking for the truth. I'm not looking for a spin. I don't like parties. I don't like politicians. I don't like politics. But I understand it's the very water in which we swim. It's like a fish saying, I don't like water. Well, not much you can do. That's what you're swimming in, right? That's what keeps you afloat, alive. That's your environment. So your environment is political. You may ignore it, but you ignore it at the detriment of your own self-worth. I was going to say self, it could be self-worth at your own cost, because that book that I use, Common Sense Economics, speaks to the fact, and that's written by a bunch of numerous, maybe 4 or 5 PhDs in economics who really know what they're talking about. And they talk about the fact that most people, even in politics and business, are economically ignorant. And that ignorance can lead to financial downfall, not just for an individual, but for an entire nation. So is this stuff important? Am I giving you stuff that I am all excited about? I love Shakespeare, so I'm going to teach you just Shakespeare, even though it has no relevance or little relevance to anybody, anywhere, anyhow, anyway at this time, right? People are way more concerned about getting work, paying their bills, having enough money for the here and now and through retirement and so forth, right? They don't care about a lot of the minutia, petty, pointless, aimless, irrelevant minutia that's going on in the news, and the infighting and the battles and the arguments and the foolishness, the general foolishness that you see on the legacy media, the mainstream media. It just nauseates me to no end. When's the last time I watched mainstream news? I don't know. I catch snippets here and there because the people I listen to will pull out something from CNN, CBS, Fox, or whatever. But 15, 20 years, I haven't listened to mainstream media, news media. Probably 15, at least 20, at least 15 years, probably 20. Anyways, let's get into it. This is, as I said, we're rolling slowly but surely towards the end. Today, we're going to look at the strong executive. Then we have the judiciary conclusion. That's about it, right? So just a few more videos. Okay, summary. This group of 11 essays discusses and defends one by one the extensive, there you go. And that's why this is broken up into such minute detail. You'll notice that the House and the Senate, it was just the layout of the lay of the land, like the blueprint. What's the layout? What are the basic requirements, rules, regulations, right, for the House and the Senate, right? But here, we're going to look at one by one the extensive powers to be bestowed on the president under the proposed constitution. No part of the proposed constitution had been more difficult to arrange than that dealing with the executive, and no part was being invaded against with less candor or criticism criticized with less judgment, Hamilton protested. Critics were playing on the aversion of the people to monarchy. There you go. So at that time, especially, that's why this country was built, because of the oppression of the monarchy, right? The British crown, right? So that was very fresh. You know, what's interesting is that voter turnout at that time, 100%. Unfortunately, over the years, it kept going down 90%, 80%. As the country got more comfortable, you know, and as people began to get to feed off the fat of the land and to move away from despots and monarchies and oppression, right? And to start to swim more freely and effortlessly within the liberties afforded one by this country, okay? And now turnout under 50%. What is it, down 40%, 30%? I don't know what it is, but anyways, it's pretty low. It's not good. Some were picturing thus this, right? We need everybody. I know that's probably unrealistic, but everybody of a voting age. And to be honest, I don't want everybody to vote. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're not informed, don't vote out of ignorance, or vote out of anger, or vote out of, you know, partisanship, you know, just for the sake of voting. You know, my father was Democrat, his father was Democrat, we've been Democrat, and of course the parties change over the years, right? Policies change over the years. Politicians change over the years. Platforms change over the years. So be careful. Sometimes I have not voted for either. I didn't want either candidate. I know we got either or these days. Sometimes, a lot of times, I would look at both and I go, geez, there's not even a lesser evil. There's two pretty terrible choices there. So I wouldn't vote. Some were picturing the intended president as having the power to make himself a despot, with the diadem sparkling on his brow and the imperial purple flowing in his train, seated on a throne surrounded with minions and mistresses. Some had gone so far in imagination as to equip him with a harem, right? And of course, you know, if you're in power, you wear purple. Isn't that a popular color of some established religions? Critics contended that the Constitution gave the president power to fill vacancies in the United States Senate. That was not true, Hamilton says. The power to fill temporary vacancies in the Senate was expressly allotted to the executives in the individual states, right? The executives in the individual states. This is what I'm talking about. So it wasn't, at least initially, given to the people, all voting power, right? As to making appointments to vacancies in the major government posts while the Senate was in recess, the president would have the power to fill such vacancies by granting temporary commissions, such as commissions to run only to the end of the next Senate session. By that time, hopefully the Senate would have considered and either approved or disapproved of such commissions. There was here no danger of presidential power grabbing. Okay. Well, that's good. And even though these statements are made, to be honest, what Hamilton says or what is being said here is not cast in stone, right? So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. Even, you know, even the greatest minds, the most fair people, you know, have biases and prejudices and so forth. So just be careful. Hamilton was right in observing that no part of the proposed Constitution was being more severely criticized than the broad, strong powers to be exercised by the executive. The popular and fiery Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, perhaps the most influential leader of the opposition, spoke for a large number of thoughtful men in saying of the Constitution that, among other deformities, it has an awful squinting. It squints towards monarchy. And does not this raise indignation in the breast of every true American. Your president may easily become king. Where are your checks in this government? See? So there were even concerns then. Incidentally, as evidence of widespread monarchical leanings, an organized movement had already proposed that Washington declare himself king. This is what I was talking about, right? A suggestion that Washington angrily denounced, right? So that's what I'm saying, you know. It's not that that was the proposed name for the new position, king, but you know, as evidence of those monarchical leanings, there was a movement, you know. Washington, you should be declared king, right? Hamilton failed to mention another major objection to the Constitution, either here or later. The strong powers of the national government were spelled out at length, but there was not a word about the rights of states and the liberties of individuals, right? So that's coming, Bill of Rights. There was no Bill of Rights guaranteeing religious freedom, liberty of the press, the right of popular assembly. And these were basically things that were restricted under King George III, right? Trial by jury and other sacred rights. Anti-Federalists took a strong stand that the proposed Constitution should not be adopted until it had been revised to include a Bill of Rights. It was the possibility that the Philadelphia document might be sent back for revisions that most frightened the Federalists. They had convinced themselves that adoption of the present draft was of vile necessity. Anti-Federalists made a strong case and soon won their point. One of the first acts of new national government was passage of the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, our long and rightly celebrated Bill of Rights. Increasingly the heart of our democratic society, the amendments were largely drafted and pushed to adoption by Madison, who soon became an anti-Federalist, joining with Jefferson and putting together varied groups in the first organized opposition of the Republican Democrat Party, right? Well, there you go. So, and there were the Whigs back in the day, the anti-Federalist, Federalist. So you had all these parties coming and going, right? Until we've got what we've got today, basically, right? And even though the Democrat and Republican Party are the major parties, you got independent parties, you got the Green parties, you got all these other minor and lesser parties out there, right? Most of which I don't know, to be honest. So yeah, there it is. That's important. Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is so important, of course, that we're going to go over that individually. We'll have a video just on the Bill of Rights. Rights. The way of electing a president, Hamilton noted with relief, was almost the only part of the system of any consequence which has escaped without severe censure. Interesting. Rightly, the sense of the people should operate in the choice of the chief executive. Here it is. Read that again. Rightly, the sense of the people should operate in the choice of the chief executive. But this was to be accomplished in a special way. Instead of committing the election of the president to any established body, the choice should be made by men chosen for the special purpose in meeting at particular times. Such men of distinction would be the most capable of deciding which presidential candidate had the best qualifications for office. All right, so this is a part of, need I say, this is kind of a part of Plato's Republic philosophy, where you know, the average person, average citizen may not be on the up and up, may not be sophisticated enough, knowledge enough, educated enough, moral enough, ethical enough, smart enough, whatever, right? Not capable of deciding the presidential candidate, right? So we'll have specific individuals appointed to making that decision. Under the plan, each state was to choose a number of electors, electoral college, right? Equal to the state's number of senators and representatives in the national government, right? So when you look at the Electoral College, those electors, or the number of electors, are equal to the Senate number of senators and representatives in each state, right? Let's go over that again. Important to know, right? Those Electoral College votes for each state, of course, California having the most populous state, therefore the most greatest number in the House, right? I don't know what the number is, 54 or something, I forget. But remember, many of the other states, mostly in red, oddly enough, small numbers, many one digit, right? 4 electors, 5 electors, 8, 9, 7 electors. Look at that map again that we pulled out last time, right? A candidate had to obtain a majority of votes in the Electoral College 270 to be named president. In case there was not a majority, provision had been made to have the choice determined by the House of Representatives, in which each state was to have only 1 vote. How each state voted as a unit was to be determined, presumably by a caucus taken among the state's delegates to the House. I'm sorry. Interesting, right? So if there wasn't a majority, there's a provision there, right? Each state was to have only 1 vote, so 50 votes, right? Again, but what if you get 25-25, right? How each state voted as a unit was to be determined, presumably by a caucus taken among the state's delegates to the House. A vice president was also to be elected by the Electoral College. He was to be the candidate who received the next highest votes after the president-elect. Do you see a problem with this? Do you see a problem with this? Sure, sometimes you might get number 1 and number 2, first and second most, from one particular party. But what if you get a Democrat and a Republican? What if when Trump won, Joe Biden got the second most votes? What if when Biden won, Trump got the second most votes? Let the chaos ensue, right? What would happen there? Among his other duties, he was to be ex officio the presiding officer in the United States Senate, entitled to vote only to break a deadlock in the Senate when the vote on a particular measure was tied. So again, Constitution not perfect, and of course amendments have been made, and it's been working towards greater perfection. Will it ever be perfected? No, because the people running it are not perfect. So that will never happen. Analysis. Hamilton's high praise of the Electoral College system of electing a president is interesting, particularly in view of the current growing feeling that the Electoral College system should be abolished entirely as cumbersome, irrelevant, and potentially dangerous, right? If you've just heard that to be true, if you just heard people say that the Constitution is old, and it needs to be done away with, it's irrelevant, it's old, it's racist, it's cumbersome, blah, blah, blah. Don't just mimic what other people are saying. You really, really, really need to do, first and foremost, do your homework, do your due diligence, study. There's a lot here. You can't just knee jerk. People are lazy. People are lazy. Predominantly, by and large, most people don't know near enough. Most people in the United States don't know near enough to make informed decisions about whether or not the Constitution should exist, or whether or not certain candidates should be elected to office, to be honest. To be dead honest, can I be dead honest? You think people, I would love to ask people questions. Okay, you're going to vote tomorrow. Okay, what are the basic responsibilities, requirements of the executive office? What power does the executive office have? Give me 3, half a dozen maybe, checks and balances in the Constitution, just so I know that you know, so when you're making your vote, it's an informed vote, not one half-assed, half-cocked, and misinformed. I like so-and-so because They're nice. I like that candidate because he or she is cool. I like that candidate because he or she is Republican, Democrat. I don't like that other candidate. They remind me of my evil uncle. Come on. It's terrible. Most Americans vote out of blind ignorance. Come on. I challenge you to challenge people. Ask them questions about not only about the Constitution, but about the economy. Ask them about trade, taxation, um, money. How is money formed? Where does inflation come from? How do you get inflation down? What is the root cause of inflation? Most people don't know. They start making stuff up. Oh, it's the war. It's the war in, the Russian war. The Russian war is causing inflation somewhat because Russia is a major manufacturer of grains and farm goods. So is Ukraine. So if those two are at war and production goes down, that will cause a little bit of inflation, somewhat. That's just one very small part of the economy, right? Price controls. I've heard other things like, for instance, that corporations are increasing prices exorbitantly. That's why there's higher prices. Basic supply and demand. Corporations know if they jack up prices on stuff that people aren't buying, people will not buy. People will buy less, right? Even if it's a staple, even if it's something that people need, they'll go elsewhere. They'll make alternative choices. So that type of foolishness, out of blithering ignorance, yet people propose it, people promote it, and God help us, people believe it. Stop. Don't stop believing. Please stop believing. Remember that song? What is that song by don't stop believing. Please stop believing. Journey, right? Sorry. Most of those who take the view seem to favor a plan whereby the president would be elected by direct popular vote, as in the case of governors, mayors, legislative members, and all other elected officials. Yeah, there you go. Right? You like my analysis? Yeah, there you go. Let's move forward. 69. 85, right? We've got 16, well, after this one. 15 more to go. Am I right? I was sorry, 25. If I learned how to count, I'd be dangerous. All right. The president would be elected for a term of 4 years. He would be eligible for re-election. He would not have the life tenure of a hereditary monarch. Also wouldn't be a judge, right? President would be liable to impeachment, trial, and removal from office. See, even if he's in there 4 years, it doesn't have to be 4 years. So that monarchy, that monolith of the monarch that came from the old country, right? Europe, Britain specifically, they worked very hard to remove it, right? And removal from office upon being found guilty of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, right? And you've heard that, like when Trump was under impeachment, they've been going after Trump, and I'm not a huge Trump fan. Again, I'm telling you, man, I don't like politicians and politics. I don't like green eggs. I don't like green eggs and ham. I don't like them in a box. I don't like them with a box. I don't like them here or there. I don't like them anywhere, right? I don't like politicians anywhere. I don't like parties anywhere. Anyways, right? So, but they've been going after Trump for what, 8 years? Nothing. Yeah, you see a pattern? Right. I mean, just nothing. Oh, we got him this time. No, oh, okay, well, we got him now. Year by year. We got him now. Stop it. Right. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. If you don't have anything and you keep attacking, it doesn't matter who it is, right? And you keep attacking these officials, these highfalutin, high-flying officials, and you continuously show that you don't have a case, then how are they allowed to continue to just browbeat or use the DOJ as a weapon for removal? I don't. Somebody work that out for me, right? Must be the powers that be. What's going on? I'm just saying. He would be accountable at all times to the country at large. The president was also to be the commander in chief of all regular United States military forces and the state militias when called into national service. The president would have only occasion command of the state militias and only when authorized by the Congress. Okay, so the militias are of the people again. The militias are beholden and belonging to the people, right? Only occasional command, and then the authority has to come through the people, through the House, which is closest to the people, right? And then the Senate, which is closest to the states. See? See? How many people know this? The Constitution needs to be rewritten. The Constitution is old. The Constitution is not dated. It's biased. It's prejudiced. They don't know anything. Sit them down and ask them questions. Once you start knowing this stuff, you can poke huge, massive, quick, rapid holes into people's arguments or their statements of alleged knowledge and understanding and proficiency with the Constitution therein. Come on, brohammers and broheimers. In addition, the president would have the power to pardon all offenders except those found guilty in the impeachment trial. He would regulate. There's one for you. He can pardon all offenders, right? Except those found guilty in an impeachment trial. So all offenders, a president can pardon anybody. Is that a problem? Do you see a problem with that? How about the most heinous of criminals? How about when Trump does it, or when Obama does it, has done it, did it, or Biden did it or doesn't do it? How come you aren't pardoning more people? How come you're pardoning these people? How come you're pardoning too many people? What does that in the aggregate, in the collective, in the long term, overall, in long-term effects? Don't just look at it in the temporary and the here and now. Oh, you're releasing these people? Well, don't do that. Why do you say that? Well, I don't like Republicans, so I don't like what anything a Republican does. You know? No, 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 no. No. Do it from a moral, ethical, practical perspective. Give me some facts, give me some data, give me some specifics on why. Not because I hate red, I hate blue. Come on, what are you, like a gang member? You got a blue handkerchief, red handkerchief hanging out the back of your pocket. You're on the wrong side of the street. Come on. This is the pettiness that we're talking about, right? That is petty. Don't get me going. We would regulate foreign relations with the advice and consent of the Senate and have extensive powers. We would regulate foreign relations with the advice and consent of the Senate. There it is again, right? So, you know, that Congress sticking its nose into things again, there's your checks and balances, right? But since the president was to be elected every 4 years, he could not possibly become a perpetual and hereditary prince like the despised and tyrannical King George III of Britain. So King George III was the young whippersnapper. What was he, like 21? At the time he was massaging the colonies with his tyrannical rule, right? Read the Declaration of Independence. Those are your grievances, right? A lot of them. 30, at least 31, 32 or some odd. Chapter 70, there were some who argued with it that a vigorous executive was inconsistent with Republican principles. And here, Republican does not mean party, right? Here, we're talking about a republic, right? If you don't know, look, with the internet, you can just do You can't be lazy, right? Look at, what did I have to do? Highlight, right click, and then I wanted to get to something, so I put the cursor here, space bar. It's about the least number of movements you need to do, right? Of a form of government constitution belonging to or characteristic of a republic, advocating or supporting republican government, right? It's also that's the adjective, the noun, right? A person advocating support republican government. Sure. Those who favor the continuance of the republic made every effort to defeat the monarchs. Yeah, right. And then down here you got the Republican Party. So the Republic, let's see if I can get another. I don't know if Britannica might be better. Right. Well, that goes in probably too much detail, right? Let's go back. I'll have to actually type something out. What is a republic government? There you go. Political power rests with the public through their representatives. There you go. Right? Political power rests with the public through their representatives. That's what I was looking for. All right. So that's what a republic is, right? With Republican principles. So here they're not talking about Republican Party. It wasn't really a Republic. It was the Democratic Republican Party, right? With Republican principles, right? All men of sense agreed, said Hamilton, about the necessity of the energetic keyword. I don't know how many times I've heard that word pop up when I'm reading the Constitution or reading Hamilton or reading whomever, founding father back in the day. An energetic executive, right? So an executive that has power and the wherewithal to do certain things that are necessary for the people, of the people, by the people. Keep that commerce humming, keep that revenue pumping, keep those dollars coming in, keep those jobs coming, right? Keep people employed, keep people safe, keep people from invasion of foreign and domestic, right? You need an energetic executive, which they didn't have before the Constitution. Remember, we talked about that. I'm not going to repeat it. I've said it many times. Right? That necessary energy would come from unity. Keyword, duration, adequate provision for its support, and competent powers. That's a nice sentence. There's a lot there to unpack. That necessary energy would come from unity, duration, adequate provision for its support, and competent powers. The first need was due dependence on the people. The second, due responsibility. Oh, nice. Due dependence on the people. So depending on the people are sovereign. Of the people, by the people, for the people, democracy, right? The second, due responsibility to your responsibility of protecting the people, ensuring the people are employed, ensuring the country is making money, it's safe, and so forth and so on, and da, right? On down the line. As to unity, Hamilton argued largely to himself that executive power should be concentrated in a single chief magistrate and not in a council or anything of that sort. The history of Rome, remember I talked about that, right? The ancient country. The history of Rome and the ancient Greek republics provided this, as well as the operation under various state governments. As chief magistrate, and if you're not sure what that word specifically means, look it up. Highlight, or you can just click here. Even be lazier, you got the search right there, right? You don't even have to right click, just search. So I tell my students, maybe in the old days before the internet, you know, if you didn't know, if you didn't have a good vocabulary, didn't know certain words, or you were being dumbfounded time and time again, your comprehension, your comprehension increases exponentially the more words that you know, right? Because you could be reading along and you come along a word, well, I don't really know that. I don't really know that one either, or that one or that one. So your understanding and comprehension becomes a little more foggy, a little more gray, a little more unspecific. And what are employers looking for? What they're looking for, good critical thinkers. And good critical thinkers are not foggy. They're not unspecific. They're very exacting in their understanding, very specific, very thorough, very comprehensive. So get with the program. And even though we're getting into the Constitution here, again, I go back to my program. My program is, and that's why I'm doing this. My program is to make sure that you're on the up and up and ready to go. And in these troubling, chaotic times, economic unsurety, right? You have to have certain skills and abilities, skills, knowledge, and attitudes in place. You know, because jobs, I don't know if they ever were that secure, right? And basic capitalism, the basic creative destructiveness of capitalism ensures that there's going to be turnover, right? Right? I know I'm diverging a little bit here, but for instance, you know, you used to have video stores, right? Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, that's at least out here and wherever you are locally, right? But those went to the wayside. Why? Because the next latest, greatest idea, product, service, intellectual property came along. And what was that? Well, the internet, first and foremost. And then Amazon, right? Amazon came along and kind of knocked the video industry out of whack, out of place. And I think more so specifically Netflix, right? Netflix, because I remember Netflix, it was a revelation, you know, with the video stores. Remember you had the VH tapes? Well, you probably don't remember. But you always had to run, you know, you had 3 days to watch the movie, then you had to run before midnight on the third day. I remember driving to the video store with my kids in the car in their pajamas, and I'd pull up and I'd have to throw it into the box to avoid a late fee. And also be kind and rewind, or else there's another $2 fee or something. And that went by the wayside because of Netflix. You could just get videos on a DVD through the mail. That was crazy, right? And of course, now everything is streamed. Where was I? I've lost my place. As a chief magistrate, the president should bear sole responsibility for his acts. There was no need of a counsel to the executive, right? This is good stuff. I'm thinking whether or not maybe I should just have another video of going in more into the essays in more detail, because this is important stuff. This is big picture, big frame stuff. Okay, 71. This is a prolix essay. Look that word up, prolix. Wow, nice one. On why the president's term in office should be limited and why a new election to the presidency should be held periodically. Just by that statement alone, what do you think prolix means? Essay on why, well, it tells you right there. It's like an argumentative essay, maybe. Let's get lazy. Unduly prolonged or drawn out, marked by or using excess of words. Prolix. Use that one at your next kegger party. This party seems to be prolixing. Don't listen to me. 4 years would be long enough, but not too long. That period would keep the president responsive to the changing views and interests of the people if he hoped for re-election. Yeah, that's good. So 4 years, and remember, impeachment, you can always bump them out of there if they're doing wrong stuff, illegal stuff. And you can't just get rid of them because you don't like them, because of mean tweets, right? They have to do something serious enough for removal. And, you know, again, it's up to Congress. Go through the House and you go through the Senate. And and he was impeached. That guy, the guy with the T name. I don't want to. Some people get triggered T. And impeached twice and not found guilty, right? Or enough. So there you go. Love him or hate him. The president should be eligible for re-election. Otherwise, the chief magistrate might become irresponsible, knowing that he would not be called to account by the people for whatever he did and might do whatever he pleased, making himself a fortune while he could, right? So this is something. So people think that this is hilarious. This is coming out of complete ignorance. People think that certain people are going to those who are running for office, the executive office, want to get into office to flex power and to gain financially, even though they do that indirectly. Like, for instance, Clinton left office broke. Did you know that? Bill Clinton. But he made a lot of money on the circuit selling books, and that's fine. Whatever. People want to give them their money, then so be it. Right? But it's difficult because of all these checks and balances, and because of the Senate, because of the House and the Senate and the judiciary and the checks and balances. It's difficult. It's not impossible to really flex too much power. You want to flex power, you probably have to go into the private sector, and build your Amazon or your SpaceX, right? You got much more power that way. Or Trump had actually more power when he was not president, and he lost a lot of money when he was president. And I guess he took his salary and gave it away to charity as well. So anyways, man having served 4 years as president would have more knowledge of statecraft, true, and the inner workings of the government than one who had not. To exclude a president from seeking to succeed himself might well result in the fatal inconveniences of fluctuating councils and a variable policy. So what does that mean? Basically, it takes some time to gain enough experience, political experience. You might even go in with some political experience, like Obama, who was a senator, junior senator, nevertheless, right? And he had a lot of hands-on experience in the community service, and community interaction, I guess you could say, right? And then you look at Trump. He had a lot of business experience. People say, well, the president's office is not one of business, and I beg to differ, because it's about economics. You have to understand trade, taxation, regulation, just basic stuff that any CEO of a business would probably understand, right? Trade, taxation, and banking. That's why people in business have and do run for office. On the Democrat side, who is the guy? I forget his name, but some billionaire running for office. I think he lost. It's not coming to me at this point. But those people have, and that's what you need. You need a good amount of understanding of economic issues, and business people, especially higher up, especially executives of large companies, and also international dealings, right? That's another skill that is needed by the executive, right? And they need to understand trade, taxation, banking, for sure, right? How that all works, right? How the dollar works, how the dollar is made, how money is made, how inflation occurs, and all that stuff. So yes, you do need to have that skill, those skills, understandings, right? In order to be the executive, right? To exclude a president from seeking to succeed himself might well result in the fatal inconveniences of fluctuating councils and a variable policy, or variable. Wouldn't you say invariable policy? Wouldn't it be plural? I don't know. Who wrote this thing? So yeah, and that's a problem, because somebody's in there 4 years and then they're gone, and then you're just starting over. I don't want to say from scratch, because it depends on who comes in office, but you're starting over to a degree, relatively speaking, depending on who's coming into office, how much experience they have had or have had in politics, right? And at what level. So, but that's one of the negatives. But one of the positives is that you're not going to have a monarch, roosting there, right, for decades or rest of his or her life. 73, the vigor of the executive branch, vigor. Oh, there's the other word, right? What was the word that was used? Oh man. It's a synonym. Don't say synonym. Sounds too much like cinnamon, and I'm hungry. Rigorous, energetic, maybe is the word I was thinking of, right? Something like that. So they're just saying that the executive branch has to have some abilities to make decisions, to have an effect, a significant, profound, I don't want to say powerful, but lasting, rigorous effect, right? Vigor of the executive branch depended on adequate provision for its support to be determined by Congress. It was possible that Congress might decide to starve, there you go, an unpopular president by reducing or abolishing his salary or tempt him by largesses to surrender his judgment and discretion, right? No provision in the proposed constitution was more judicious than this, said Hamilton. Judicious, judge, to make good judgments, right? If you don't know what judicious means, largesse, you should look that one up. I should just do a video vocabulary, right? Generosity, bestowing money or gifts upon others, right? There you go.
Largesse, largesse.
If you don't know how to pronounce it, there's the button. Come on, people, educate yourselves. Guess who does most of the educating? People think teachers do it. You got to do you. We do the 10%. We introduce, we suggest, we prompt, we summarize, we enthuse. Right? Hopefully build up some type of enthusiasm within the individual for self-supporting, self-gaining, self-perpetuating education. Because teachers aren't going to be there. They're not going to be there that long. And life is long. And you got to constantly be learning stuff, especially in this day and age. Right? With the amount of change. The information age. And it's not so much the information age anymore. It's the suggestion age. Where you've got all these experts, all these YouTubers and social medias, influencers, right? I don't know how influencing a lot of these people are. And I look at many of these influencers, I go, well, if they're influencing, I say, get away from that influence. Anyways, Hamilton, the president would receive for his services a compensation which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected, and shall not receive within that period any other emolument, there's another word, from the United States, and that's pay. Again, let's do this. Payment, pay, right? Increase your vocabulary. Emolument from the United States or any of them. This would make the president financially independent and free to move as his judgment dictated. Good, right? So they've really thought this through, right? So, think about that. If the president was able to increase his or her pay while they're in office, right? Guess what they try to do? The president should have the power to exercise a qualified negative over the acts of the two legislative bodies. He could return all bills he objected to so that they could not become laws unless subsequently passed again, this time by a 2/3 vote in both houses in Congress, right? This would protect the president from having this power whittled away by the legislature and by a safeguard against hasty and ill-considered legislation. This would tend towards greater stability in government. To avoid a clash with the legislature, the president would be inclined to use his qualified veto cautiously. So let's read that again. I think that's important. The president should have the powers to exercise a qualified negative over the acts of the two legislative bodies. So here again, checks and balances, right? He can return all bills he objected to so that they cannot become laws unless subsequently passed again. This time by a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress, right? This would protect the president from having his powers whittled away by the legislature and be a safeguard against, so if he sees certain bills that are coming across his desk to be passed to limit his powers, maybe, right? Say he doesn't have the veto power, right? So if he sees that there's a problem with the bill, then he can send it back through. So now you're going to need to get even more people, more representatives and senators to vote in the positive on this bill if you want it to come along, because I see problems. And be a safeguard against hasty and ill-considered legislation. There you go. This would tend toward greater stability in government. To avoid a clash with the legislature, the president would be inclined to use his qualified veto cautiously, right? So it's about a balance of powers. It's, you've got to work with people. You've got to reach across the aisle, even sometimes, as they say, red with blue, blue with red, and it's not just about screaming matches and, fights in the aisles and we're going to get our way, damn it, no matter what, right? It has to be reasonable, rational, calm, hopefully potentially interactions, right? That's one of the main intents of the Constitution. Chapter 74, among other requisite powers, the president was to be commander-in-chief of all regular United States military forces and state militia. The propriety and reasons for this were so obvious, said Hamilton, that there was no need to discuss. The president was to have the power to grant pardons and reprieves for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. There had been little criticism of this, Hamilton noted, except in relation to treason. Some argue that one or both legislative houses should be brought into the proceedings involving the possible pardon of anyone convicted of treason. Well, that makes sense, right? To be a little more, to ensure to a greater degree that the right thing is being done, right? Hamilton saw some merit in that view, but concluded by saying that the power of granting pardons in treason cases should be left solely in the hands of the president, for in seasons of insurrection or rebellion, the president could act more decisively and judiciously in granting amnesties. This might prevent the contending groups from coming to a violent and possibly disastrous collision, right? So checks and balances, and you also have to, keep the peace so that you maintain the government, so that decisions can be made, compromises can be made, decisions made, compromises made as well, so that what's best for the people and maintaining the peace, of course, is essential. Analysis. No comment is needed here in Hamilton's outline of what a president's power should be or the duration of his term in office, but this should be noted. A president was to be elected every 4 years and was eligible for re-election. There was no constitutional restriction on how many times he might succeed himself. He might go on indefinitely. After 2 terms, President Washington stepped down, establishing a 2-term precedent that was followed until it was broken by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1940 and again in 44. That will not happen again. A constitutional amendment 2022 now limits a president's tenure to 2 terms, with one exception: if he should succeed in the office following the death or removal of the president and serve less than 2 years of that term, he may then be elected for an additional 2 terms. All right. And finally, 75 through 77, 75, in the author's opinion, one of the best digested and most unexceptional parts of the Constitution was the provision empowering the president to make treaties, but only by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So you see, right, the Senate, Congress, the Senate, the House coming in on a very regular basis, being involved in decisions, right? Checks and balances, right? Providing 2/3, which is, as we said, 66, roughly 66 and a third, right, percent of the senators present concur. This would prevent an irresponsible president, whether from ambition or avarice or other motive, from negotiating and signing a treaty without due consideration. No treaty could go into effect until the Senate had discussed and debated it and given approval by a 2/3 vote. A few minor objections had been risen to this provision. Some argued that approval in the Senate should not depend on a 2/3 vote of senators present, but on a 2/3 vote based on the entire membership of the Senate, which might be entirely different. Right, because not all senators are present at the time of votes. You've heard about that, right? We had a vote this morning, Bob. Where were you? Hamilton dismissed this argument as academic. The votes on this question should be those of the senators present, those who had taken pains to make sure that they would be present for good reasons, and bad senators would often be absent on critical roll calls, right? So interesting how Congress, the House, Senate, it's kind of like school, right? Absent, present, absent, absent, present. And they're not going to, call you at home or call you on the road or call you at the bar, if you're not there, right? You got to be there to make your vote count. And that's one thing you do to watch your representatives and your senators, if there are a lot of absences, just like a poor school student, right? It had also been argued that the House of Representatives should share in the formation of treaties. Hamilton replied that the members of the House were too many and too diverse in their interests, that their 2-year term of office was too short to expect of them any accurate and comprehensive knowledge of foreign politics. There you go, right? So again, I said to you that senators are the senior, more seasoned, more experienced politicians or representatives, I guess, right? The House closer to the people, but also more junior, right? So they're not involved. They don't eat at the big table, right? They eat at the kids' table. Kind of a weird example, but that's kind of how it works, right? So the House, there were too many of them, too diverse in opinions, right? And also not enough experience, right? So their understanding would not be significant enough or thorough enough to make those decisions as regards foreign policies or decisions in regard to what's going on in foreign relationships, right? Chapter 76, with the advice and consent of the Senate, the president was to have the power to nominate and appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, justice of the Supreme Court, and all other United States officers. However, Congress could, by law, vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, or in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments, right? So best. What is that? Some people think that they're talking about, well, you know what a vest is. Means that a person has an absolute right to some present or future interest in something of value. So again, it's about the rights, right? It's about their rights, correct? Right. All right. Hamilton repeated, I hate these commercials. Hamilton repeated what he had previously said, that the true test of a good government is its aptitude and tendency to produce good administration. Surely, he said, almost everyone would agree that the proposed plan for making appointments would produce a judicious choice of men for filling offices. And of course, that includes women these days, right? The president would have the sole responsibility of nominating men for higher office, but there was a check on him. His nominations could be rejected by the Senate, which would greatly tend to prevent the appointment of unfit characters. Unfit characters. And then finally, cooperation of the Senate in the matter of appointments would add to the stability of the administration, as a consent of the Senate would be necessary to displace as well as to appoint. A change of president would not occasion so violent or so general a revolution in the officers of the government if he were the sole disposer of officers. If a man had proved his fitness in any particular high office, a new president would hesitate to displace him and bring in someone more agreeable to him from fear of getting a rebuff in the Senate, which would bring some degree of discredit upon himself. After arguing at some length and more than a bit tediously on the point that such an argument would not give the president improper influence over the Senate, nor the Senate over the president, Hamilton enumerated the remaining powers of the president, the chief being these. Here's a nice little list. Giving information to Congress on the State of the Union. So the State of the Union address, right? You've heard about that. Recommending to Congress what measures he judged to be necessary or expedient, and calling Congress into special session on extraordinary occasions. And you've probably seen that aspect of the presidency shown again and again and again in movies, you know, when there's aliens coming and they have to call a special session, right? He hoped he had demonstrated, said Publius, that the structure and powers of the executive department combined as far as Republican principles would admit all the requisites to energy, there it is again. There was one more major consideration about the proposed constitution. Does it also combine the requisites to safety in the republic sense? A due dependence on the people, a due responsibility. There they are again, the people, right? Of the people, by the people, for the people. Yes, it's a democracy. So if people say it's not a democracy, you go, yes, it's a democracy. However, it's a representative democracy controlled by the law of the land, which is the Constitution. It's a representative democracy controlled by the law of the land, which is the Constitution. That's how it's said. So stop saying it's not a democracy. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy. What do they say? You know, give people a little knowledge, they're dangerous. Those are the dangerous ones. We have a little knowledge. Not enough. And those people don't even go to the next layer, right? I talk about very shallow thinking, superficial thinking, non-critical thinking. In these chapters, Hamilton does well in elaborating on many great advantages to flow from the constitutional provisions, encouraging and facilitating close cooperation between the president and legislatures, especially with the Senate, on such important matters as making treaties, making major appointments, and seating Supreme Court justice, among other things, right? So that's good. That's in the done and the here and now. So we just got the judiciary, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. So I think we'll have enough for just one video there, and then we'll do the conclusion. And then after that, we still have the Bill of Rights and the 27 amendments. Or is it the 17 amendments? We'll see. All right, so that's it for now. Thanks for coming out. Take care.